Welcome to the We're Better Together podcast. I'm Ian Stevenson.
And I'm Daniel Arduña. Each month, we're excited to bring you an incredible interview with someone who has experience in facilitating an environment where people work better together.
And each week, we'll share some actionable tips and strategies that you can implement in your daily life to help you function better together, whether it's in your marriage, family, team, workplace, church, or community.
Thanks for spending time with us today. Now let's jump into some content and get better together.
Happy Monday, listeners. It is 10-minute tune-up time, and we are back again to bring it for you because this last conversation we had with you is about this idea of consistency and the importance and the value that consistency can bring. We'll take a bit of a different spin today and talk about this idea of spontaneity, being spontaneous, and the value and importance that also comes with that side of things. When we think about the value, we think about people that are really structured, planned, and we think about there's people that thrive in being spontaneous, in the improvisation of things. And we want to spend a little bit of time today just talking about the value that can be placed on us working on being spontaneous. Ian, I know one of the things that immediately comes to me that we can maybe even just help to frame around this is I love movies and I love TV shows and that idea. And if we have any Star Wars fans out there at all, there's, this wonderful movie, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. And Princess Leia looks at Han Solo and says, "I love you." Well, Harrison Ford line back to her was supposed to be, "I love you too." But in the moment, Harrison Ford instead decided to say, "I know," which is now like this massive classic line for anyone that loves Star Wars that seems so fitting to his character, but was not a part of the planned written script. And yet something that happened spontaneously with some improvisation has now become this massive known line in this world of Star Wars. That's just to help frame the conversation around here. And Ian, as you take that and you think about this idea, what things to begin to formulate for you that you would want to share with our people this morning?
Well, I love that word improvisation. I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here with spontaneity, right? Is sometimes we have a plan and plans are important, but we have to be willing to improvise at times. And when we improvise appropriately, it makes things better. And so I think what we want to accomplish in our 10-minute tune-up today is we want to help our listeners think about finding those opportunities to improvise and make things better. Now, I think there's also like two personalities here, right? Just like in most cases, some personalities love the consistency and the structure and the plan, and other personalities love to improvise, love the spontaneity, hate the plan, hate feeling like we're stuck in this structure that we can't get out of. So we all lean probably to one side or another pretty strongly. But what we want to try to do here today is how do we find the middle? How do we respect the consistency, which we talked about last time, but also respect those opportunities for spontaneity and to improvise in order to make things better? So that's what comes to my mind right off the top. I'm just, as we have this conversation, we want to help our listeners think about it from, first of all, considering who's on your team. Like as you look around your team, whether it's at work or at home or whatever, what are those personalities? Who is more structured? Who is more spontaneous? Which way do you lean as you're lead? If you're the leader and you're leading it, which one do you tend to lean into? And therefore, which one might you need to be a little bit more open to? And, even if for those of you that are just listening and you don't see us right now, if you were to see us, you would know just by looking at our visual on YouTube, who on this podcast is a little more structured and who is more spontaneous. And guess who's more? So I'm the more structured one. Daniel's more spontaneous. So again, this whole "we're better together" thing, this is just a great conversation to have. So Daniel, from a spontaneous person standpoint, what would you say is important for us to pay attention to as we're encouraging our listeners on this?
Yeah, I think that it's about creating the culture that invites that and that welcomes the spontaneous when it happens. And even maybe even before it happens, it just sets up the atmosphere for it to be a welcomed into whatever it is that you're part of. So you think about your work, you think about if you're in school, you think about your job, you think about your marriage. And I think that there's so much value to creating that openness and that welcoming of spontaneity for yourself and for whatever the team is that you're a part of, whether that's one partnership or it's a group that's bigger than that. I think that what that happens for yourself is that you open the door for you to be spontaneous, meaning that you're looking for those moments yourself. I think one of the big things that can happen for any of us in spontaneity is that it can actually help us with problem solving. So many times we may be so structured and then we run into something that was not expected. And now it causes us to have to think differently, to solve something creatively. And I think spontaneity, when we welcome it, helps us in those problem solving skills. And now we just gained a new tool to our belt that the next time we run into that, or we run into something that was unplanned, it's like, oh, hey, I've tuned my mind a little bit in my brain to process in a new kind of way. I think that it brings that. I think when you think about, hey, if you are a planner and you're super consistent, if you can welcome the person in your team, that when you see spontaneity happening in them, you embrace it instead of shutting it down. Hey, I'm in a meeting. We always have a meeting at 10 a.m. on Mondays, right? And I always have the structure, and I've got the first 10 minutes or this, the second 10 minutes or this, the third part is this. If I never allow for anyone on my team to have any improvisation, or I'm not attuned to that, I'm missing something. But if I can walk in and still have that consistency and that structure, Ian, yet be aware, hey, I've got people in here that work spontaneously. And when someone jumps out with a new idea or says, hey, can we look at this in a different way right now? It's one thing to shut that down. It's another thing to open up the door to let that in. And I think what that can do is that it can bring freshness. It can bring fresh ideas that are birthed out that still aren't removed from your vision and your mission.
Yeah, I think the value, speaking as someone who is more structured, the value of being open to spontaneity is twofold. It increases creativity, right? Like you just mentioned, but it also increases, as the leader, you're kind of modeling to everyone more of a sensitivity, like a sensitivity to be open to new things. Sometimes for someone that's more structured and loves the consistency, you come across as cold and hard and just stuck. But when you are open to spontaneity, it increases that level of sensitivity to the team, and it opens, like you just said, the door to creativity. So there's huge benefits in it. But I think when we lean too hard into our tendency, maybe as a structured person, it squashes that, right? And so that affects the team dynamic. It affects the performance of the team. And so when we're talking about spontaneity here, we're not talking about like going off on any crazy rabbit trail. We want to keep it in line with the mission and the vision, but it's just maybe a different way of looking at it, or a different exercise that helps you get there in a different way. So it's not about, last month, I think we talked about play and the importance of play in making things better together. Here we're talking about more spontaneity in the course of working together, like being open to new ways, open to new ideas, open to it in the context of the structure that's being created, right?
Yeah. I mean, for our listeners, let me give you a couple more examples. Coming back to this idea of the film industry, think about a director and an actor. Director has this scene exactly lined up how they want it with the dialogue that they want. Here's a great way that you can actually balance the two things that Ian was just sharing about. So maybe for the first take that you do it in the planned way. Here's the dialogue. Here's your movement. Here's this. Do it for me. Now, the way that you can welcome spontaneity is then say, okay, for take two, the director looks at their actor and says, you have freedom to play here now. Play the scene how you want to play it. So if you want to spin off in a bit of a different way with the dialogue, do it and let's see what happens. There's a great example of taking, hey, some of the consistency in the structure, but now welcoming a bit of spontaneity that involves that creativity to come in. Another thing that comes to mind to me as a runner when I think about sports, I'll never forget a run that we went on where we're running in a line, but the person that was in front chose the direction that we're going for the day. We're used to having a 4-mile run that goes the exact same route. Oh, but today, all right, if you're in the front, you take us, you choose left or right. Then the person in the back is going to run to the front and they're going to make decisions. Now we just opened up the door for creativity, ownership on the run that's for today, something that's different, that charged us in a different way. Or I think, a couple of weeks ago in a church service that we had, we said, hey, we're a little bit smaller today. We're missing some team members from our band. Hey, what if we move everyone down to the floor, take them off this stage? We're going to go completely unplugged. And we're going to make this even more intimate than it already is. And hey, we got some responses when we were done from people in our community. Hey, this still felt very much like narrative, but there was a different kind of intimacy that was felt today that was so refreshing. And we really appreciate that you were willing to be spontaneous in the moment, in the morning, and make a different decision.
Those are great examples, Daniel. That's so good. So as we wrap up, we want to encourage our listeners to, if you're in the more structured camp, find opportunities this week to do something a little different, to invite spontaneity into your meeting, your vacation, your team, whatever it is. Find a way to be spontaneous. And if you're a spontaneous person already, like that's just natural for you, we want to encourage you to just be open to celebrating if your leader, if your team does something spontaneous. Point it out, welcome it, try to help encourage healthy spontaneity in the context of your team's mission. So that's your little tune-up for today. You got anything you want to close out with, Daniel?
We're just so thankful that you continue to join us on this journey. We just want to remind you again, if this speaks anything to you today, or there's people in your lives that you're thinking about in the various circles that you have, where this idea of spontaneity is something that would be really encouraging to them, share this with them. You know where to find us on our various platforms. Go ahead and share this link with them. And join us again next week as we come back to spend some more time with you next Monday. Thank you so much. Have a great week.
Thank you.